Hey everyone, Nigel here. In case you missed our announcement earlier this week, we're going to be taking a bit of a break from Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International for the holiday season. Don't worry, we'll be back with all new episodes starting in January. But until then, we've got a bunch of interesting compilations that we hope you'll enjoy. Today, we're going to be looking at some of the best stories from past Crimes of the Week episodes, featuring victims who fought back. These are cases where the targets of crimes refused to cooperate, or else threw a wrench in the plans of criminals in some other way. One thing to keep in mind is that these segments have not been edited since they appeared in their respective lists, so references to specific charges as well as other small details may no longer apply. Alright, enough said, let's get into it. A would-be thief got more than he bargained for this weekend when he tried to rob a Plainfield, Indiana bakery and was fought off with a barrage of food and other objects. According to reports, 25-year-old Matthew Marshall walked into the Two Chicks whiskey business on Saturday afternoon, dressed in a ski mask and gray pants. After locking the door behind him, he grabbed at his hip as if he had a gun and attempted to rob the place. However, the owners and employees responded by hurling food and other items at Marshall, causing him to run from the store. All he managed to get away with was a tip jar. It didn't take long for investigators to catch up with Marshall, thanks to a witness who managed to take a photo of him fleeing the scene, which was handed over to police. Marshall is now in jail after being preliminarily charged with criminal confinement and robbery.
Police in Aiken County, South Carolina say that a suspect in a home invasion case this week is dead after one of the homeowners fought back. According to reports, 61-year-old Harold Runnels broke into the home of 82-year-old Herbert Parrish on Monday afternoon and began to attack his 79-year-old wife. The assault began when Runnels came to the couple's back door under the guise of looking for a missing dog. He then knocked the elderly woman to the ground and began to slash her forehead with a knife before Parrish beat him with the butt end of a shotgun. Runnels later died in hospital from his injuries. Neighbors say that Parrish is a decorated veteran who served during the Vietnam War. Following the incident, the Aiken County Sheriff's Department said that the couple would not be charged in connection with Runnels' death. The Parrishes were both treated for minor injuries, but are reportedly okay.
This week, it was reported that an 11-year-old Florida girl managed to escape from an attempted kidnapping unharmed, thanks in part to information she had learned from the television program Law & Order SVU. The incident took place at around 7 a.m. on Tuesday, when Alyssa Banal was waiting at her school bus stop in Pensacola while playing with some homemade slime. Out of nowhere, a white Dodge Journey SUV pulled up nearby, and a man got out and ran towards Alyssa, trying to take her. Thanks to the TV show Alyssa watched with her mother, she reportedly knew that she needed to fight back. Despite the fact that her attacker was armed with a knife, that's exactly what she did. Surveillance video managed to capture the attack as it unfolded, and Alyssa could be seen struggling with her assailant before he dropped her and ran away. However, there was one additional thing that Alyssa managed to do that would help authorities take down the suspect. Knowing that she needed to leave behind evidence, she wiped as much of her homemade slime as she could on the would-be kidnapper. When police tracked the suspect down a day later, blue dye from the slime was found on his arms, and pieces were found on his clothing. The man has since been identified as 30-year-old Jared Stanga. Stanga has now been charged with attempted kidnapping, aggravated assault, and battery. His bond was set at over $1.5 million on Wednesday.
Authorities in San Diego County, California say that one person is dead this week and 5 others have been arrested following the early morning home invasion of a local residence. According to reports, the incident began at approximately 1:15 a.m. on November 10th at a home on Moonstone Bay Drive in the city of Oceanside. That's when the 6 suspects, more than one of whom was allegedly armed, attempted to break in and rob the homeowner. Once the suspects were inside, a struggle ensued, causing the homeowner, who has not been identified by name, to grab his own gun. He then began to shoot at the intruders, who allegedly returned fire. At some point, one of the suspects, identified only as a 31-year-old man, was struck by a bullet fired by the homeowner. After this, the rest of the suspects fled. When police arrived at the scene, they attempted to administer first aid to the 31-year-old suspect, but he died from result of his injuries. A short time later, a vehicle was pulled over nearby that supposedly contained the rest of the fleeing suspects. One of them had also sustained a gunshot wound, though his injuries are said to be non-life-threatening. The 5 suspects were arrested and have since been identified as 29-year-old Deshaun Ingram, 21-year-old Eric Dunnigan, 21-year-old Michael Simmons, 24-year-old Jalen Harvey, and 25-year-old Sidney Tucker. In addition to robbery charges, all 5 suspects are now facing murder charges in connection with the death of their 31-year-old accomplice. Even though the suspects did not shoot the 31-year-old, they are accused of being involved in the crime that led to his death. At the current time, the homeowner is not facing any charges and is not suspected of a crime.
This week, police officials in West Palm Beach, Florida, gathered to honor a 9-year-old girl for bravery after she recently fought off an attacker who mugged her mother. According to reports, the terrifying incident occurred on November 2nd, when 9-year-old Journey Nelson and her mother Danielle Mobley were walking to their car after shopping at a local supermarket. As Danielle was putting the groceries they had just purchased in the back of the car, a man, who has since been identified as 29-year-old Demetrius Jackson, ran up to her and tackled her to the ground. As Jackson struggled on the ground with Danielle for her purse, 9-year-old Journey reportedly sprang into action, running around the car to help her mother. Without hesitation, she began to throw as many punches as she could at Jackson's face. Though Journey was pushed to the ground by Jackson, who managed to take off with Danielle's purse, she still chased after him for 5 blocks before he got away. The police later caught up with Jackson, and he was arrested and charged with robbery and battery. While authorities generally recommend against members of the public taking matters into their own hands in situations like this, they commended Journey for her bravery in trying to stick up for her mother. Speaking about CCTV footage that captured the robbery taking place, West Palm Beach Police Chief Rank Adderley commented that it looked like Journey had hit Jackson pretty hard. In addition to a medal, Journey was presented with a Target gift card at a celebration in her honor this week.
A trio of would-be robbers allegedly got more than they bargained for this week when they attempted to violently steal money from a local pizza shop, and one of them was shot in the face. According to reports, the incident took place around 10 p.m. on December 9th when the 3 suspects walked into Bold Pizza in Philadelphia's Spring Garden neighborhood. After entering, the men allegedly tried to steal cash from the shop's register, and when an employee resisted, one of the men started to choke her. Within moments, the woman's 14-year-old son reportedly sprung into action, grabbing a handgun from below the counter and shooting the man who was choking his mom in the face. After that, all 3 suspects apparently ran. A short time later, police who responded to the incident were able to find the injured suspect in a nearby subway station by following a trail of blood. Authorities allegedly received further confirmation of the man's involvement when they found a large amount of stolen cash stuffed in his pocket. The suspect, who has only been identified as a 33-year-old man, was taken to the hospital, where he reportedly remains in critical condition. At the time of this recording, police say that they are still searching for the other 2 suspects involved in the attempted robbery. It's believed that the group might have also been involved in the robbery of a CVS drugstore about a block away from the pizza shop just a short time before. Anyone with information is encouraged to contact Philadelphia police.
Authorities in New Orleans, Louisiana, say that a would-be mugger recently got more than he bargained for after he assaulted the mother of a teenage powerlifter who proceeded to chase him down and tackle him. According to reports, on December 28th, 18-year-old Messina Tupea was simply enjoying her vacation with her parents when out of nowhere, a man sprinted towards her 47-year-old mother Louisa as the family walked down Magazine Street. Before any of them could react, the man had punched Louisa in the jaw, dislocating it, and tried to steal her purse. Though the attacker soon gave up on his attempt to steal the purse and tried to flee the scene, Messina decided she couldn't let him escape and sprung into action. The teenager managed to catch up to the suspect when he was tripped by a bystander. However, the first time she tried to grab him, he punched her in the face and continued to run away. Undeterred, Messina began pursuing the attacker once again, soon catching up to him in an area where her father was chasing him around a car. After dodging another one of the attacker's punches, she grabbed onto the back of his shirt, then tackled him to the ground. The attacker tried desperately to escape, but it was no use. What the attacker didn't know about Messina is that despite being just 5 feet 5 inches tall, she is extremely strong. A lifelong athlete and avid powerlifter, Messina still holds a record in the sport from when she was 15, when she deadlifted nearly 320 pounds. Messina was able to keep her mother's attacker pinned until police could arrive, at which point he was arrested. The man was subsequently identified as 36-year-old Augustus Taylor, who is now facing 1 charge for purse snatching and 2 others for simple battery. According to reports, Taylor has pleaded guilty to battery charges in New Orleans at least 4 times since 2010. Despite the unfortunate incident, Messina said that she and her family still enjoyed their trip. In interviews with local media, she said, quote, "My parents told me that stuff happens, but you can't let stuff like that affect how you perceive places. Although it sucks it happened to us, we're glad someone like that is off the street." Representatives from the NYPD say that the victim of a phone theft was left with the last laugh this week after he duped the alleged suspect into getting arrested for the crime. According to reports, the incident began at around 11 p.m. on March 1st, when the 20-year-old victim was riding the subway near 34th Street Penn Station. As he was sitting on a northbound E-train, his phone was allegedly snatched by a 57-year-old man named Kevin Cooper, who immediately fled after the theft. Figuring he had nothing to lose, the 20-year-old victim called his stolen cell phone after the crime, believing there might be a chance of recovering it. To his surprise, Cooper picked up. During the phone call, the 20-year-old got an idea. He told Cooper that he'd be willing to buy the stolen phone back from him if they could meet up. Cooper agreed, and they made plans to meet the following day. Unbeknownst to Cooper, when he showed up at the meeting, he was actually walking into a trap. The 20-year-old was working with the police. Unfortunately for Cooper, he hadn't just shown up to the meeting with the stolen phone either. He was also carrying 2 Ziploc bags allegedly containing crack. Cooper was arrested at the scene and is now facing charges of grand larceny, criminal possession of stolen property, and criminal possession of a controlled substance. According to reports, Cooper has an extensive criminal history and has been arrested more than 50 times. Authorities in Ventura County, California say that a would-be burglar was recently on the receiving end of a nasty beating after he broke into a residence and grabbed a number of items, only to be caught in the act by the homeowner. According to reports, the incident took place just after 6 p.m. on April 1st, when 60-year-old Sal Marcato returned to his home in Oak Park and discovered that he was being burglarized. A man he didn't recognize was sitting in a parked SUV outside of his house, while a second man, 43-year-old Alexis Provoste, was allegedly inside taking whatever items of value he could find. Upon realizing what was happening, Sal rushed inside his house and immediately confronted Provoste, punching him in the face. As Provoste pushed past Sal and tried to escape, the 60-year-old punched him again, this time sending him to the ground in the front yard. Though Provoste continued to try to make it to the getaway vehicle where his accomplice was waiting, Sal didn't give him the chance, proceeding to rain down more blows on him while keeping him restrained. When it was clear Provoste wasn't getting away, his accomplice sped off without him. When police arrived at the scene, Sal handed Provoste over, who by this time had a number of cuts and bruises to his face. A search revealed stolen property in his pockets, and during the commotion, Provoste had also dropped a laptop and high-end camera he had stolen from Sal's house. The 43-year-old was taken to jail and subsequently charged with first-degree residential burglary and conspiracy. Investigators now say they believe that Provoste, who is a Chilean national, is part of a so-called South American theft group. According to reports, these thieves are believed to take part in a sort of crime tourism, where they come to the U.S. on a 90-day visa with the intention of burglarizing wealthy homeowners. At the time of this recording, Provoste remains in police custody, with his bail set at $150,000. The identity of his alleged accomplice is currently unknown. If you're a regular viewer of our Crimes of the Week series, then you probably know that most of the time when we bring up TikTok in one of our videos, it's because police are warning the public about the legal consequences of yet another viral online challenge. However, this week, we managed to find a story where TikTok actually helped to stop a crime from potentially getting much worse. According to reports, it all started on the afternoon of April 10th, when a woman from Hickman County, Tennessee, was visiting her brother. At some point, the woman's ex-boyfriend, 31-year-old Jonathan Smith, showed up at the property, and the woman agreed to leave with him in his truck. Things soon took a dark turn when the pair got into a physical altercation while driving down Highway 100, causing the woman to ask to be let out of the vehicle. Smith reportedly refused before grabbing a screwdriver and threatening the woman, telling her that if he couldn't have her, no one could. Realizing that her life was now in danger, the woman waited until Smith stopped at a gas station near Highways 100 and 46 before trying to call for help. She decided that the best way to do this without drawing Smith's attention would be to use a signal for domestic violence that she had learned on TikTok. Once inside the gas station, the woman made eye contact with the store's cashier, before putting one of her palms forward, tucking her thumb in, and closing her four fingers over it. The cashier repeated the gesture back to the woman, acknowledging that he understood what she had done, and began to stall Smith at the register while other employees at the location called 911. Unfortunately, Smith figured out what was going on before police could arrive at the scene, and he forced the woman back into his truck. He sped off from the gas station just as an officer from the Hickman County Sheriff's Department pulled up. The officer was able to follow Smith's truck, initiating a chase that lasted for nearly 15 minutes. The situation finally came to an end when Smith lost control of his vehicle in Dickson County and crashed his truck into a creek. He was captured while trying to flee on foot, and the woman was safely rescued without any injuries. At the time of this recording, her name has not been released. Police have since credited the hand gesture that the woman learned on TikTok with saving her life, saying that this isn't the first time it has helped to successfully rescue a domestic violence victim in danger. If you recall, we covered a similar story like this back in November of last year, where a 16-year-old North Carolina girl was rescued after she flashed the hand signal at passing motorists in Kentucky. Though the hand gesture was technically created by the Canadian Women's Foundation, it has since been popularized on many social media channels, particularly on TikTok. At the time of this recording, Jonathan Smith remains in police custody and has been charged with aggravated kidnapping and aggravated domestic assault. Authorities in Plymouth County, Massachusetts are applauding the bravery of a 14-year-old girl this week after she managed to not only scare off an intruder who was breaking into her home, but also secure the evidence that allowed police to make an arrest. According to reports, the incident took place at around 7:20 a.m. on April 15th, when 14-year-old Avery Cormier awoke to the sounds of someone breaking into her home in the town of Middleborough. Instead of being paralyzed by fear, Avery immediately sprung into action, grabbing a pair of knives from the kitchen and confronting the male intruder. When the suspect saw Avery and heard her screaming at him to get out of the house, he immediately ran for it and fled back to his truck to drive away. However, Avery's quick thinking continued, and she was able to pull out her cell phone fast enough to capture video of the suspect's vehicle and his license plate. Police used the information Avery provided to track down the intruder a short time later, and he was arrested. He was subsequently identified as 58-year-old Joseph Ridge. Ridge is now facing charges of aggravated breaking and entering during the daytime, trespassing, and disorderly conduct. The police aren't the only ones commending Avery for her quick thinking and bravery, though. In an interview following the incident, the teen's mother told reporters, quote, "I really didn't realize that she had it in her to stay so calm under fire. I'm blessed to have a daughter like her." Authorities in Clark County, Washington say that a suspected serial armed robber got more than he bargained for this week when he tried to hold up a gas station convenience store and was attacked by the store's cashier with a can of bug spray. According to reports, the incident took place recently in the city of Vancouver when the suspect entered a local B&B mart. After heading up to the cash register and placing a drink on the counter, he reached into his pocket as if to pull out his wallet, but instead pulled out a handgun. The man proceeded to point the weapon at the store clerk, Amber Maley, telling her to put all of the money in the register into a bag. However, rather than complying with the suspect's terrifying demand, Amber immediately sprung into action, grabbing a large can of bug spray directly to her right. She then began to unload as much of the spray as she could in the man's direction while shouting at him to get out. Spooked by Amber's quick and aggressive attempt to fight back, the suspect immediately fled the scene of the bungled robbery, empty-handed. Though the suspect managed to escape and his identity is currently unknown, authorities have released images of him taken from surveillance footage captured at the convenience store. Police now say that they believe he is a serial robber who may be responsible for more than 30 similar crimes in Clark County and the Portland metro area. His list of previous targets reportedly includes coffee shops, hotels, restaurants, and auto parts stores, and in each case, he is said to have been armed. Authorities are now asking for anyone with information about the suspect to come forward, in the hopes that he can be successfully identified and taken into custody. He is described as a man between 30 and 35 with brown hair and a brown beard, roughly 5 feet 8 inches to 5 feet 10 inches tall, and weighing 160 pounds. Though police have warned members of the public from confronting the suspect directly like Amber did, according to her, the idea of giving him the money like he demanded never even crossed her mind. In a recent interview, she said that her instinct to protect herself was automatic, and that in the moment, all that she knew for sure was that she wanted the armed criminal out of her space. Authorities in Martin County, Florida say that a man survived a harrowing 2-day kidnapping this week after 3 men forced him to get behind the wheel of a vehicle during the ordeal, and he drove badly on purpose to attract the attention of police. According to reports, the incident began sometime at the beginning of last week, when the 3 suspects showed up at the victim's home in Port St. Lucie. While the victim has not been identified by name, reports state that he runs a dog breeding business and had recently posted about his financial success online. This had attracted the attention of the suspects, who decided to pay him a visit. After posing as interested dog buyers, authorities say that 22-year-old Tezdekiel Sellers, 25-year-old Benjavine Radcliffe, and 22-year-old Kashavia Bragdon went to the victim's home and proceeded to kidnap and assault him. They also demanded that the man hand over the cash he had talked about making from his dog breeding business. For the next 2 days, the victim was allegedly held captive by the 3 suspects and was taken to multiple locations where the robbery and assaults continued. That was until the criminals reportedly made a critical mistake and forced the victim to get behind the wheel of his own vehicle. While on the road, the suspects told the victim to drive to a location that took them through Martin County, where it just so happened officers from the local sheriff's department were patrolling as part of their traveling criminal response team. It was then that the victim got an idea. Knowing that he needed to get the attention of police, the victim began driving erratically, committing multiple traffic infractions, hoping that officers would notice. Sure enough, one officer did, and proceeded to pull him over. Much to the victim's horror, however, after approaching the vehicle and briefly talking to him, the officer decided that he would graciously let him off with a warning. Too afraid to say anything in front of his captors, as the officer started to walk away, the man began to make hand motions, signaling that something was going on. Thankfully, the police officer noticed, told the victim to get out of the car, and he was able to explain the whole situation. The Martin County Sheriff's deputy called in backup, and all 3 of the suspects were subsequently arrested. Inside the vehicle, authorities found guns, knives, and a large amount of cash. According to reports, Sellers, Radcliffe, and Bragdon are all now facing a laundry list of charges in connection with the incident, including carrying a concealed firearm, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, kidnapping to commit or facilitate the commission of a felony, home invasion, and providing a false name. A horrifying story was reported out of Alabama this week, where authorities say that they uncovered the murders of 2 people after a 3rd victim managed to escape and get help. According to reports, the incident began at around 8:30 a.m. on August 1st, when a passing motorist spotted a 12-year-old girl obviously in distress walking down the side of a road in a rural area of the city of Dadeville. After stopping to help the girl, the driver immediately called police. When detectives spoke to the 12-year-old, she began to reveal the nightmarish details of her ordeal. More than a week ago, she had been kidnapped and taken to a property close to where she was found and held captive. She had been tied to a bedpost for that entire time and force-fed alcohol to keep her in a drugged-up state, until finally she had managed to chew through her restraints and escape. She had done this with such force that she had broken the braces on her teeth. When the 12-year-old led police to the mobile home where she had been held, the situation only got more chilling when investigators discovered the dismembered remains of 2 bodies inside. Tragically, these were soon revealed to be the girl's mother and brother. The mother has since been identified as 29-year-old Sandra Vasquez Ceja, while the brother has been identified only as a male child under the age of 14 with the initials AOGV. The residence where the remains were discovered belonged to Ceja's boyfriend, 37-year-old Jose Pascal Reyes. Reyes was not home when the bodies were initially found, though was eventually arrested somewhere in the neighboring city of Auburn. It's now believed that Reyes kidnapped the 12-year-old victim around the same time that he murdered her mother and brother. According to reports, Reyes was Ceja's boyfriend, though it's unclear if she and her children were living with him at the time the crimes took place. While the 29-year-old and the 2 children had come to the U.S. from Mexico in 2017 and reportedly had formal asylum in the country, Reyes had been removed from the U.S. in 2014 and had re-entered illegally. At the time of this recording, Reyes is now facing numerous charges, including 2 counts of capital murder, 2 counts of corpse abuse, and 1 count of kidnapping. The situation is still developing. Authorities in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania are commending the actions of a 10-year-old boy and a teenage retail worker this week after their quick thinking helped to thwart an attempted kidnapping. According to reports, the situation started sometime on the afternoon of November 11th when 10-year-old Sammy Green was on his way home from school. It was a walk that the 4th grader had made dozens of times before, but which that day would take a disturbing turn. As Sammy was in the middle of his journey, he was approached by a woman he didn't know. The woman started asking him questions, where he was going, where his family was, and most chillingly of all, whether he wanted to go with her instead. Sensing something was off about the woman, Sammy tried his best to continue on, but he soon realized that he was being followed. Though obviously terrified and initially unsure what to do, Sammy started to think and remembered something that his dad had told him. Act casual, but look for another person to help. Taking his dad's advice, Sammy walked into one of his favorite local stores, a one-of-a-kind gift shop called Danny B. Funky. As soon as he did, he approached the 17-year-old cashier, Hannah Daniels, and asked her to pretend that she was his mom. Hannah says that when Sammy walked into the store, she immediately noticed that he looked scared. But because of the way the strange woman was following him, she initially assumed that the stranger was his mother. However, as soon as Sammy explained what was going on, Hannah immediately took action. She told Sammy to wait in the store's back room, and she walked to the store's front entrance, where the woman was still holding the door open, and forced it closed before locking it. She then called the police. Though the woman left before police could arrive, they immediately recognized her from the store's surveillance footage. She is reportedly a local homeless woman who suffers from mental health issues. Sammy's family say that they are not pressing charges, but that the woman has now been referred for mental health help. In the meantime, they say that they are proud of the way both Sammy and Hannah handled the situation, but that Sammy will have a family friend walking him home from now on. Authorities in Clark County, Nevada say that one man is dead and another is now facing numerous charges after they allegedly attempted to carjack 2 women and one of them was forced to fight back. According to reports, the incident began sometime on November 19th when the two victims, who have not been identified by name, traveled to a friend's house in North Las Vegas for an early Thanksgiving celebration. After arriving at the house early, the two women decided to sit around in their vehicle close to the property on Coleman Street and San Miguel Avenue and wait for a bit before heading inside. However, it wasn't long before they were terrifyingly interrupted. As the two friends sat talking, all of a sudden, another vehicle quickly pulled up and parked directly in front of them, blocking them in. Then, either 2 or 3 armed men jumped out of this vehicle and started heading toward the women. Before the women could react, 2 of the men had grabbed them and started pulling them out of the vehicle. Once the owner of the vehicle was thrown from the driver's seat, one of the suspects got inside and started trying to operate the car. After telling her friend to run, the vehicle owner reportedly realized that the suspect was having trouble getting her car into drive. Apparently, the car operated on a push-to-start system, and the man wasn't familiar with how it worked. Not only that, but in his confusion, the suspect had placed the gun he was carrying on his lap. Seeing that the man wasn't paying attention to the weapon, the vehicle owner grabbed the gun before trying to run away herself. While the woman was able to grab the weapon, she only made it a few steps before being tackled to the ground by the same suspect. The two struggled, and the woman tried to escape, but she was unable to. That's when she allegedly managed to turn around and shoot the man instead. After freeing herself, the woman ran onto a nearby property and hid in a side yard, as another of the suspects fired shots at her and missed. When police arrived at the scene, they found the suspect who had been hit dead from a gunshot wound to the head. The remaining suspect or suspects had fled. Both women were physically unharmed, and though the vehicle owner was initially taken into custody, she was later released once the shooting was determined to be in self-defense. This week, authorities announced that they had arrested one of the other suspects who allegedly took part in the botched carjacking, who they identified as 18-year-old Jalen Morrison. Morrison was reportedly arrested on December 2nd after surveillance footage taken near the crime scene placed his vehicle in the area, and shell casings from a gun he had were allegedly found to match ones recovered from the shooting. Police say that Morrison was also a known associate of the deceased suspect, who so far has not been identified by name. The teenager is now facing numerous charges, including second-degree kidnapping, attempted robbery with a deadly weapon, burglary with the use of a deadly weapon, conspiracy to commit robbery, and attempted grand larceny of a vehicle. At the time of this recording, it's unclear if police are still searching for a third suspect. A pair of young Oregon boys are being applauded for their bravery and quick thinking this week after a woman stole their father's car with them inside, and they managed to escape and call for help. The whole thing started at around 2:45 p.m. on January 22nd, when the boys, ages 11 and 9, were with their father in Portland's Arbor Lodge neighborhood. The kids had just been picked up from school and were waiting in the car while their dad went to get their younger sister from her school, when all of a sudden, a strange woman they didn't know hopped into the driver's seat. To their horror, she started driving the car, which had been left idling. The boy's father saw what was happening and tried to run back, but was only able to grab a door handle before she sped away. Though the terrified father raced back to the school and immediately got someone to call 911. According to reports, it was ultimately the 9 and 11-year-olds who gave police the information that they needed. Roughly 10 minutes after being kidnapped, they seized their opportunity to escape and jumped out of the car when the vehicle momentarily came to a stop at a red light. They then flagged down a Good Samaritan, who also called police. Authorities caught up with the female suspect a short time later as she headed north on Interstate 5. She refused to pull over, prompting a chase that involved multiple law enforcement agencies and continued across state lines into Vancouver, Washington. The pursuit came to an end near the northeast 134th Street exit after police cruisers were able to pin and immobilize the stolen vehicle. The woman, later identified as 33-year-old Ayosha Deshay Millage, was then placed under arrest. At the time of this recording, Millage is facing a number of charges related to the chase, including attempt to elude, reckless driving, driving with a suspended or revoked license, and fugitive from justice. She's expected to face additional charges related to the actual kidnapping once she is extradited back to Oregon. A 20-year-old college student was reportedly left shaken and with a rather large dent to his bank account last week after he heroically came to the aid of a woman in the middle of an alleged domestic violence situation, only to find himself the target of the attacker instead. According to reports, the whole thing began at around 1:30 a.m. on February 20th, when 20-year-old San Diego University student Angelo Montoya was working his late-night gig as a driver for the food delivery app DoorDash. He was on his way to pick up his next order and had just gotten off the interstate in San Diego's Ocean Beach neighborhood when suddenly he was met with an alarming situation. A man and woman were clearly involved in some sort of violent altercation, and the woman was screaming out for help. Initially, Angelo reportedly tried to tell himself it was none of his business. However, his conscience apparently couldn't let him. That's when he turned around and went back to the scene to ask the woman if she needed help. She immediately said yes and begged for him not to leave. Though the 20-year-old initially thought that his presence would calm the situation down, unfortunately, this could not have been further from the truth. Instead, the male suspect allegedly turned his anger towards Angelo, at first yelling at him to mind his own business, and then trying to attack him when Angelo said he would not leave and was calling the police. After reportedly being punched in the neck, Angelo started dialing 911 on his phone and told the woman to get into his car. They then started driving away to try and get to safety. To Angelo's horror, though, the male suspect began chasing after them in his own vehicle. This apparently resulted in two more extremely dangerous encounters, one where the man cut them off and tried to get to him and the woman again, and a second in which he allegedly rammed Angelo's vehicle, causing it to smash into several other parked cars. Thankfully, however, he then finally left them alone. The male suspect was later arrested and charged with assault with a deadly weapon. While neither Angelo nor the female victim were seriously injured, the 20-year-old was briefly hospitalized after the incident. His prized Tesla, which he reportedly worked for years during high school to purchase, was also apparently left in rough shape. All the same, Angelo says he does not regret his actions and says he still thinks it's important to stand up for what's right, even when it comes at a personal cost. In the meantime, he has set up a GoFundMe to help assist with his legal and medical bills, as well as to help pay to fix his car. An elderly Idaho woman is being praised for her heroic actions this week, nearly a month after she was the victim of a terrifying and violent home invasion, one in which she killed the alleged culprit while fighting to protect herself and her disabled son. The harrowing ordeal began at around 2 a.m. on March 13th, when 85-year-old Christine Janaean awoke to find herself in a real-life nightmare. A man, later identified as 39-year-old Derek Condon, was standing over her bed shining a flashlight in her face. He was dressed in a military jacket and black ski mask and was also holding a handgun. Before Christine could react, Condon reportedly hit her in the head, causing her to bleed all over her pillow and the bedroom floor. The next thing the 85-year-old knew, she was being marched into her living room at gunpoint, where she was handcuffed to a wooden chair. After taking Christine hostage in her own home, Condon reportedly demanded that she reveal the location of all of her valuables. The 85-year-old said she didn't have much, but eventually told him that there were two safes downstairs. Her goal was to get Condon as far as possible from the room where her disabled adult son David slept, out of fear for his safety. Unfortunately, Condon apparently figured out someone else was in the house and repeatedly threatened to kill Christine upon realizing he'd been lied to. Despite how terrifying the whole situation must have been, as Condon rummaged through the residence looking for things to steal, Christine reportedly decided to seize her opportunity. She slowly dragged the chair she was handcuffed to back to her bedroom, where she was able to grab her own handgun. She then worked her way back to the living room, tucking the weapon between the arm and cushion of a couch while waiting for Condon to return. When Condon walked back into the living room, Christine apparently decided that she had to act if she would have any hope of getting her and her son out of this situation. She grabbed her gun and fired at Condon, hitting him 2 times. He fired 4 shots back, hitting Christine in the abdomen, arm, leg, and chest. Christine fell to the floor, while Condon stumbled into the kitchen, where he died. Though Christine would spend nearly 10 hours lying trapped in her living room before help arrived, miraculously she survived her injuries. She has since been released from the hospital. Evidence at the scene supported her version of events when she told her story to police. A window was broken at the back of the residence, and a screwdriver was found next to the door where it's believed Condon broke in. A lockpick was also found on his person at the time his body was recovered, and his vehicle was found nearby with footprints leading to Christine's residence. This week, Bingham County prosecutor Ryan Jolly announced that Christine's actions were completely justified, calling the case, quote, an easy analysis of self-defense and justifiable homicide. He went on to say, quote, it also presents one of the most heroic acts of self-preservation I have ever heard of. Obviously, Condon can no longer be held legally responsible for his actions since he's dead, though Jolly clarified that had he survived, the 39-year-old would have been charged with attempted murder, kidnapping, burglary, aggravated battery, and grand theft. Representatives from the LAPD are asking for the public's help in identifying an unknown male suspect this week, following the disturbing attempted kidnapping of a teenage girl that was partially captured on video. According to reports, the terrifying broad daylight incident took place at around 3:30 p.m. on July 23rd, when the victim, identified only as a 15-year-old girl, was walking home in Los Angeles' Vermont Vista neighborhood. She was passing by Figueroa Street Elementary School when suddenly out of nowhere she was approached by a strange man. To the girl's horror, she realized that he was carrying a gun just as he grabbed the back of her neck with his other hand. Thinking quickly, the teen fought back with the only thing she had, her cell phone. After striking the man repeatedly, thankfully he ran off and she was able to get to safety. The disturbing incident was partially captured by a surveillance camera at a nearby business, and the footage has since been turned over to police. They are now treating the situation as an attempted kidnapping and are asking for anyone with information about the suspect or crime to please come forward. A Georgia fast food employee reportedly found himself in a fight for his life recently, after the business where he was working was the target of an early morning attempted armed robbery, and he felt that he had no choice but to go head-to-head with the suspect. The situation began shortly before 4:30 a.m. on July 1st, when the victim, identified only as a delivery driver for Chick-fil-A, was working an overnight shift at the company's Stone Mountain location. The man was in a back room at the restaurant when suddenly he heard a loud noise coming from the kitchen area. That noise was allegedly the sound of 51-year-old Tommy Lee Williams, who had just shattered the restaurant's drive-through window with a rock. Moments later, Williams, who was armed with a handgun and wearing a mask and hood over his head, climbed through the broken window and explained that he was robbing the place. According to reports, Williams held the driver at gunpoint and told him that he was going to die if he didn't open the restaurant safe for him. The driver explained numerous times that he didn't have the combination to the safe, but Williams apparently continued to threaten him. Deciding that he had no choice but to try and fight his way out of the situation, the driver waited until it seemed like the 51-year-old on the restaurant's security cameras. They show how the driver struggled with the attacker, pushing him all around one of the back rooms and at one point even completely disarming him. Critically, the driver also managed to remove Williams's mask, which would later help police to identify him. Evidently realizing that his robbery was not going to be a success, Williams eventually grabbed his gun and fled the restaurant out a back door. He was gone by the time police arrived. However, thanks to the surveillance footage and a vehicle that Williams allegedly drove to the restaurant prior to the crime, police had plenty of evidence against him. He was finally tracked down and arrested on July 31st. The 51-year-old is now facing a number of charges, including armed robbery, aggravated assault, burglary in the second degree, kidnapping, possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and criminal damage to property in the second degree. A California woman is being applauded for her creativity and proactive problem solving after she set up a clever trap for a pair of accused thieves who are now facing serious charges as a result. According to reports, the whole thing started on the morning of August 19th when Santa Barbara County Police received a call from a woman who said that she had just been the victim of a theft. She stated that a package of hers had been stolen out of her post box at the local Los Alamos post office. Now, under normal circumstances, you'd expect that all police could really do is come down and take a statement and maybe file a report about the theft. However, this was no ordinary situation. You see, this woman had actually had her mail stolen several times now. Out of both frustration and desperation, she decided to take matters into her own hands. And that particular morning, having her mail stolen again was actually part of the plan. A few days earlier, the woman had mailed herself an Apple AirTag. If you're unfamiliar with these, they are relatively inexpensive and small tracking devices that, once activated, can show you their location on demand in Apple's Find My app. After mailing herself the AirTag and seeing that her package had been stolen again, the woman looked up where the device had traveled. At that point, she had called police. Using the information the woman provided, officers were led to a residence about 16 miles away in Santa Maria, where they came face to face with two suspects, 27-year-old Virginia Francesca Lara and 37-year-old Donald Ashton Terry. The pair were not only allegedly in possession of the stolen AirTag package, but items that had been stolen from over a dozen additional victims. The pair of suspects were both arrested and are now each facing a slew of charges. Lara was taken in on felonies including possession of checks with intent to commit fraud, fictitious checks, identity theft, credit card theft, and conspiracy. Terry, meanwhile, has been charged with burglary, possession of checks with intent to commit fraud, credit card theft, identity theft, and conspiracy. A Florida woman is extending her sincere gratitude this week after she was the victim of a terrifying ordeal at the hands of a violent sex offender, one that easily could have ended in tragedy if it wasn't for the intervention of a Good Samaritan. The whole thing unfolded at around 4:30 p.m. on September 2nd, when the victim, Veronica Jones, was finishing up a routine shopping trip at her local Walmart on Orlando's South Goldenrod Road. She was in the parking lot putting her groceries in the trunk of her car when suddenly she was grabbed from behind. At first, Veronica apparently thought it was a prank, possibly someone that she knew playing a joke on her. However, when the person didn't let up, she quickly realized she was in serious danger. In a subsequent interview, Veronica stated that the male attacker grabbed her whole body and began trying to force her into the trunk of her own vehicle. She stated, quote, "He kept pushing me. I was pinned against my car. He kept pushing me toward my trunk as he was pulling my purse at the same time." The suspect clearly wanted Veronica's purse, but she wasn't about to give it up without a fight. Her wallet, driver's license, insurance card, phone, cash, and a $125 check were all inside. However, as she fought, things escalated. She felt something up against her neck that she realized was a knife. That's when the attacker said, quote, "If you don't stop this, I'm going to slice your throat." Veronica tried to scream, but the man shoved a glove into her mouth while continuing to try and force her into the trunk. Somehow, she was able to get out one desperate cry for help, which thankfully was enough to alert another woman in the parking lot. She got out of her car and ran over to help. The suspect finally got a hold of her purse, but he ran off after seeing the Good Samaritan, leaving Veronica mostly physically unharmed. Fortunately, it turned out that the suspect wasn't very smart. The man, later identified as 54-year-old Juan Perez, was not only captured on Walmart surveillance cameras during the crime, he was wearing a GPS ankle monitor from a previous kidnapping case. Perez was arrested the following day and is now charged with attempted kidnapping, armed robbery with a deadly weapon, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, battery, and destruction of evidence. According to police, he has a lengthy criminal record and is a registered sex offender in the state for lewd or lascivious battery of a victim 12 to 15 years old. In an interview, Veronica said that she was grateful to the Good Samaritan who intervened, saying, quote, "I'd like to thank the girl that stopped, though, because she stayed with me the whole time. She was a lot of help." At the time of this recording, Perez remains in custody. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.